Many of you received access to either the Boost or Macabacus Excel add-in as part of your enrollment in this course, so I wanted to take a few minutes to demo how they can be used to make you a faster and more efficient financial modeler. In fact, you're going to see me using some of the most time-saving shortcuts that these add-ins offer and some of the modeling exercises in this course. So now you absolutely do not need to install either add-in to go through this course, and everything we cover can be done within Excel natively. So if you did not receive or can't install the add-in for whatever reason on your machine, you can just skip this video. For the rest of you, I'll spend the next several minutes showing you how to use these tools. So in this video, I'm going to go through the top 10 or so shortcuts using both Boost and Macabacus and give you the general lay of the land for both tools. Obviously, these add-ins have a lot more functionality than what I can show you over the next several minutes, and within the Boost or Macabacus ribbon, you'll see a comprehensive list of everything they have to offer. But in the interest of time, I'm just going to focus on the stuff that really does end up saving a ton of time. Now, as an aside, I happen to be using Boost in a lot of the videos, but as you'll see in just a moment, I'm going to start with a quick demo of Macabacus and then switch to Boost. But virtually the exact same thing can be done in both add-ins, almost always using the exact same shortcut. So let's begin. So here I've sort of laid out kind of a simple, just kind of a simple Excel spreadsheet with a couple of already pre-built numbers just to kind of show you. I'm going to go through a bunch of, again, the things that I think are the most helpful. I've got Macabacus installed here. You can see it's a ribbon, just like the standard, ribbon tabs within Excel. And here you've got a whole bunch of things that Macabacus can do, but neither Macabacus nor Boost are about using stuff on the ribbon. They really are about memorizing a bunch of really useful shortcuts and using those. It's not about this ribbon. There's a few useful things here, and I'll get to those, like seeing a list of all the possible shortcuts and customizing some things, but it's about shortcuts. So let's get started. Probably the most common set of shortcuts are called formatting cycles. And basically, if you've got a bunch of numbers, so Control-Shift-1 is the number cycle. I've highlighted a whole bunch of numbers that I want to toggle through a variety of cycles on while holding. Let me actually kind of make this column a little bit larger so you can see that those number signs. It's just the formatting gets a little bigger. Control-Shift-1. While I'm holding Control-Shift and I just keep hitting the number 1 repeatedly, you see I toggle through a variety of pre-built formats that Macabacus takes a stab at by default as being the ones you're going to use the most often. They similarly have something for a date cycle, so Control-Shift, toggle through the number 2, you toggle through a variety of date formats. Again, all of these can be customized. Now I'm looking at numbers, so I'm just going to hit Control-Shift-1 again to get back to that. I have Control-Shift-5 goes through a variety of percentage signs. All right, that's probably the one, Control-Shift-1 and Control-Shift-5 are the ones that you definitely want to kind of commit to memory because you use those a lot. And then maybe the third one to commit to memory is Control-Shift-8, which goes through multiples. Control-Shift-8 kind of goes through multiples, that X. So this is trading at 12X or whatever. You toggle through it. Now, the truth is, all of these can be customized. I mean, you can make, and I actually prefer this, is to create one master cycle with all of the multiple and date and percent cycles that I like. And I sort of attach that Control-Shift-1. You can actually do that within here, configure. You go into the numbers format. And here, it's sort of been pre-populated by what Macabacus thinks is, is what you want to see. These are the formats. This is Control-Shift-1. You see them toggling through it. And you can add as many as you want. So you can add a format that's a percentage. Again, the way to do that is you need to use Excel's general sort of syntax for percentages, or a general syntax for anything, really. So for negative numbers, you separate with a semicolon, you put this in, and now you have negatives. Now, you want to probably be better with alignment, and so the way to really do this is to go into Excel's native Control-1, figure out what exact kind of function you want, or just to borrow from the percent cycle here and say, I like this format, so let me drop that into, if you want to make a master one, drop that into here. So you sort of copy and paste this, and then all of a sudden you've created sort of a master format here. Rather than using kind of this dinky thing that I've done, I can just sort of create this one. So click OK, and now you see if I can Control-Shift-1, it's kind of taken in the percentage, and I can create this sort of super duper shortcut cycle. Okay, in any event, let's move on to the next thing. So I'm going to sort of now go on to, and I'm just going to create this income statement. I have revenues, and this is just a little bit of basic modeling. I'm going to grow the revenues, and bear with me. I'm doing this to show you how some more Boost functionality, or Macabacus functionality, I should say. Again, Control-Shift-1. Let's kind of get the formatting of this all kind of consistent. And now I want to do the same thing with expenses, and I've got an assumption here that expenses as a percentage of revenue are always going to be 80%. Let's say I assume it's always going to be 80%. Well, normally, natively in Excel, I just do Control, I have to kind of highlight this and Control-R. Or I highlight the range, or I just do Control-C and then Control-V. Right. Well, Macabacus, same thing with Boost, basically lets you just, because they both recognize that there's a data series that ends in column age, you just have to hit Control-Shift-R, and it just pastes it across. So now, all I do here is I create a formula, just kind of saves you a step. Oops. Just saves you a step. Why does this keep happening? There you go. Control-Shift-R again, and it knows exactly where to stop. And again, I can kind of use the cycle to kind of standardize everything quickly. The next thing I want to show you is, I find this to be incredibly handy. Control-Shift-N, if I want to see expenses enter as a negative, this comes up time and again in modeling. I don't want to have to do like a minus sign. Like, there's a bunch of different ways to do this the long way natively in Excel. I could sort of do a -1, and then if I want to convert this to a negative, I could just do paste special, multiply. So it is possible to do natively in Excel, but it's a little time consuming. And one of the nice things that both Macabacus and Boost do is they let you just do Control-Shift-N. Notice it says this selection contains formulas. Do you want to flip the sign of formulas? I'm going to say yes. And here it is. I now have everything negative. So I find this to be really useful, and then I can do Alt plus. This is a native function in Excel, and I've summed it up, and I'm good to go. So again, Control-Shift-N. So let me just kind of tick off the stuff we've already talked about, just so I don't repeat it. All right, the next thing that's really cool is something called AutoColor. AutoColor lets me look at this data and highlight a selection, hit Control-Alt-A. That's the shortcut for AutoColor. And notice what it's done. It's recognized what's a formula versus what's a hard-coded entry. This is Excel best practices, or financial modeling best practices. Anything that's a hard-coded number should be formatted as a hard-coded number, as a blue. Anything that's a formula should be black. AutoColor does even better than that because it also distinguishes between formulas that link to other worksheets and workbooks. Let's get to that in a second. Just all you have to remember is that Control-Alt-A auto-colors based on whether something is an input, just a calculation, or links to other worksheets or workbooks, which I'll demonstrate in just a moment. So the next thing I want to talk about is a really, really powerful feature in Macabacus, which is the ability to trace precedence and dependence slightly more in a more sophisticated way than native Excel allows. So I'm going to create a super complicated formula for no good reason. It's just that, and a lot of times in modeling, you have formulas that are super complicated. This one, the one you're about to see, before you get comments like, why would you do such a complicated formula? You wouldn't. I just want to show you how the function works. So I've got net income, and I'm going to try to calculate cash from operations directly from net income. So I'm going to start with net income, and then on a different cell, in a different area, I create a new, well, let's see here, where did I put this? Let me add back depreciation. Actually, I don't think I put it in. Let me create depreciation and amortization here. And let's say that was 100. Control-Shift-R across the board. Notice Control-Shift-R automatically increments by 1. You may or may not want that, in which case you kind of just do something like that. I want it all to be 100. And so I'm going to do cash from operations. I'm going to add back depreciation and amortization. And then, if you may have noticed, in another workbook, I created changes in working capital. I'm going to have to create this. Accounts receivable are growing. Those of you who are comfortable with the accounting, the growth needs to be treated as a reduction in cash outflows. The finance of this doesn't actually matter so much for our purposes here. Just bear with me. I want to just create a super complicated formula. That's all I'm really trying to do. So I've created a formula that grabs all this working capital information. It's already getting unwieldy. And then in another tab, I've got capital expenditures here, and let me fill that in right there. Let's call that 70 and grow that. So now I'm going to copy and paste this formula across, and you've got these sort of cumbersome formulas here. So if I wanted to understand, if I come upon this formula a little bit later after building, I'm like, what is going on here? Well, a really cool way to audit what's happening is say Control-Shift left bracket. And that opens up this Pro Precedence window. The Pro Precedence window takes that formula, and with the arrow keys, it takes you across different workbooks and different worksheets to show you exactly, to parse out exactly what the formula looks like, so you can inspect it. And in fact, if you land on something that's another formula and you want to make sure you understand it, you can hit Enter and go in there and inspect that formula. So that's a really, really cool feature that lets you kind of look at formulas and break them out and understand what's going on. So the reverse of that is trace dependence, which is you can go into, say, this workbook and say, is there any function that depends on that cell? Or actually, let's go. It doesn't work across workbooks. Trace dependence does not work across workbooks, but it does work across worksheets. So Control-Shift, right bracket. And you can see that, oh, that 70 is getting pulled into this formula. So again, that's really, really useful. With the limitation, obviously, the dependence will not identify any dependence in other workbooks. So that's trace precedence and trace dependence, really cool features. We talked about auto color, but the next thing I want to show you is auto color. If you kind of reactivate auto color, let me do that again, you'll see now that this formula is colored differently because it recognizes, hey, you have references to other workbooks. If the reference, by the way, if I was just referencing CapEx, that format would be different on AutoColor. So again, it's distinguishing between references to worksheets, which is this color, references to workbooks, which is that color, just straight formulas and hard-coded inputs. So it's really cool, really useful. It's something that's a very important part of financial modeling best practices. Also, so let's just kind of take those off. I think we covered just about everything. Oh, one last thing I want to mention, borders. So a really quick, easy way to kind of get borders going. Control-Alt-Shift, down arrow key puts a border. Control-Alt-Shift, holding that down, left and right arrow keys. They just put borders around however you want, right? So here, let me just kind of zoom in. Zoom in is Control-Alt plus sign. I wasn't going to talk about that, but might as well mention that that's another useful one. Control-Alt plus sign just kind of zooms in. And you can see that these borders, if I hold down Control-Alt-Shift and then put the up arrow, left, right, down again, it creates a different border width. You see that it's changing. You're toggling through a variety of borders. You can put them wherever you want, and this comes in remarkably handy quite often. So again, I'm going to sort of undo that, and that's another cool thing that both Macabacus and Boost both allow you, which most add-ins don't, allow you to do quite a bit of undoing. A lot of times add-ins just kind of remove the undo stack and you can't really undo anything. Here you can actually undo quite a bit. It doesn't work 100% of the time, but it's pretty good. So now we talked about the border cycle. The very last thing I'll leave you with is that under settings, again, you've already seen that you can kind of configure most of these. You can customize most cycles and things fairly easily. But the other thing I wanted to show you is that there's this shortcut manager in here. In other words, if you've got other add-ins you're using, other features where there's a Macabacus shortcut that you can't use because another tool is using it, well, you can really easily change that. So I can change the percent cycle, to an entirely different shortcut. So if I want to make a Control-Alt-Shift, and I could see what's available and create a new one or whatever. And if I screwed something up, I could just hit reset all, and it kind of restores what I did. So that's the shortcut manager. You need to know where to find that. And then if you want kind of a whole list of where all the shortcuts are, you can find them under print. It'll create a little workbook you can print that's nicely formatted with this giant list of 140 shortcuts that you can use. What I wanted to do is to just go through kind of the super high yield ones. And in fact, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to see me going through, I happen to use Boost, but as you'll see, the shortcuts are identical throughout courses, just especially things like autocolor and number cycles. I just use that all the time. All right, so now let's do the same thing with Boost. I've installed Boost here instead of Macabacus. You can see, you know, you got the ribbon with all the functions. Again, like I said, it's not really about the ribbon, it's about the shortcuts. So I'm just going to kind of clear all the formats here, all the work that we've done. And I'll show you it's basically the exact same thing. So whichever version you got makes no real difference. So Control-Alt-Shift, down arrow key puts a little border sign on there. Let's just, you know, right fill, Control-Shift-R fills it to the right. Expenses. So this is one where the sign is actually different. So instead of Control-Shift-N for Boost to flip something from positive to negative, it's actually Control-Shift backslash. So here I'm switching backslash this way. Still the same basic idea. And now Control-Shift-1 toggles through a variety of the default shortcuts in Control-Shift-1 for Boost. There are more of them. Again, you can fully customize those. And we're just going to use the basic number ones. Control-Alt-A for autocolor. Autocolors based on, again, was it something from another workbook? Let's grab this stuff below. Was it something from another workbook or worksheet? And you can see it's the same story. I'm going to do Control-Shift percentage sign. One thing that both of them have that I didn't mention before is Control less than increases decimals, Control greater than decreases decimals. So let's just add that to the shortcut list. Control less than to decrease decimals. Control greater than to increase decimals. Let me change this. Okay, so the final thing is just trace precedence. Works the same way in Boost as it does in Macabacus. Control-Shift left bracket opens up this dialog and you kind of go through the entire formula. Trace dependence, if I go to the CapEx cell here, for example, and hit Control-Shift right bracket, that'll identify that, hey, this is a dependent cell. So again, works the exact same way. And that's about it. So as you'll see for the rest of the course, as I mentioned, I happen to be using Boost. But the shortcuts, except for a few here and there, as you see here, all of these are identical. I try to use Excel native shortcuts as much as possible, so I'm not overly reliant on Excel add-in, but I will say that this group of 10 or so shortcuts I do use quite a bit. I do find it to be extremely time-saving and valuable just to memorize these. I don't memorize all of them, but I do memorize these, and you'll see that I use them throughout the course. So when you see that, recognize that that's what's happening, and I encourage you to do the same thing.